Hello, everyone. I'm Saleha, and this is Chai Chat and Community. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting tonight, and I would like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. October is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the theme for this year is We All Have a Role to Play. This means we take time out to look after ourselves, our loved ones, and become a mental health ally. More so because there's so much stigma attached around mental health issues, and we don't talk about it openly in our communities. Joining me tonight is Professor Marie Yap and Sunita Bapuji, a research officer, both from Monash University. Thank you for joining me, ladies. Much, much appreciated.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Yap is a professor of psychology and a psychologist at Monash University's School of Psychological Sciences and Turner Institute for Brain and Mental Health, recognized by Expertscape as a world expert in family relations. She is passionate about empowering parents with evidence-based strategies for their child's mental health and well-being. Marie leads an award-winning parenting strategies program, which has rolled out digital parenting resources for child and youth mental health in Australia and in more than 25 countries. Marie, wow, just wow. Sunita is a second year PhD candidate under Marie's supervision, researching to support immigrant parents to raise resilient kids. She is also working as a research and evaluation officer in a health system. In the past, Sunita worked in the Indian Army and in Canada as a registered nurse and a researcher. Wow, I am in exalted circles. But before I ask you questions, because this is a very important subject, I would like to share some data that I found from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare website. So this is for both the ladies, and if you can tell me if it is correct or not. Over 2 in 5 or 8.6 million Australians aged between the ages of 16 and 85 are estimated to have experienced a mental disorder at some time in their life, with 1 in 5 or 4.2 million having experienced a mental disorder in the previous 12 months. Anxiety disorders such as social phobia are the most common type of disorder, affecting 1 in 6 or 3.3 million Australians, followed by affective disorder such as depressive episode, which is 8%, and substance use disorders such as alcohol dependence. Almost 1 in 7, that is 14% of children and adolescents aged between 4 and 17 years are estimated to have experienced a mental health illness in the previous 12 months. 800,000 people are estimated to have severe mental health illness, of which 500,000 people have episodic mental health and 300,000 have persistent mental health illness. Mental health and substance use disorders were the second largest contributor of non-fatal burden of disease in Australia. Staggering figures, isn't it, Marie? Staggering.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my question to you is, what exactly is mental health, and why is it still a taboo discussing this openly in our communities?
Sure. Mental health is defined by different people in slightly different ways. Perhaps one of the more authoritative definitions is provided by the World Health Organization itself. And they define it as a state of well-being in which someone realizes their own abilities, is able to cope with normal everyday stresses that they might experience. And if they're working, they can work productively and they feel like they're making a contribution to a community where they belong. There are some critiques of this definition because, it kind of makes assumptions about people being able to contribute to the community and be productive in their work, and perhaps might speak not so favorably about people with disabilities, perhaps. So there are some critiques about that, but generally most people would agree that it is a sense of well-being. There's a capacity to cope, and that's, it's not in the absence of stresses, but they're able to still cope in the midst of that. There's a range of reasons, of course, why mental health as a topic still remains quite taboo, and it has changed quite a lot. I think the awareness and understanding and openness to mental health as a topic in Australia has improved over the past few decades, and some research suggests that it could be attributed to work like Beyond Blue, for example, in Australia, where they have done really huge kind of campaigns and very successfully in informing the community across the Australian population about mental health. But we know that there are still gaps in people's understanding and their sense of openness and acceptance of it as a topic or as an experience amongst people they know, and of course in themselves as well.
Thank you. So, Marie, 3 simple things that we can do to improve our mental. Yes, sure. Yeah.
Talk about we are talking about Asian diaspora, right? So in that situation, I feel it is still a taboo because it is seen very negatively. And also people believe that, demons, supernatural and spiritual factors play a role. And even developmental disorders are also clubbed into mental illness. And in different languages, if a person is showing crying or showing exhaustive fear, they kind of call them mad in different languages, like in Hindi pagal, in Nepali pagla, and Bangla pagla, and in my language they say pichoda, and Tamil it is paithyam, and in different languages they are called in different ways. And I think sometimes the movies also play a negative role in creating a situation, like in some of I'm talking about Indian movies. There is a movie called Kilona and Khamoshi, which kind of portrayed. But as you mentioned, the awareness is increasing. Recently, in a few years ago, like there were 2 movies, they titled Indian movies, Mental and Mental Hai Kya. But there was a backlash, and it was changed into Jai Ho and Judgmental Hai Kya. So yeah, and in South Asian diaspora, people are not encouraged to, why there is lack of awareness about mental illness or mental health is because they are not encouraged to do education in psychology or psychiatry. And even if they do, the positions are not much available for them to take up the jobs. Yeah.
I think the whole issue of stigma and the sense of judgmentalism is still very real, and there's been a lot of research that's been done on trying to understand this whole idea of stigma that's related to mental health, and some of the learnings or some of the key findings are that stigmatizing attitudes kind of they're kind of in a couple of clusters. So one is just that general idea that mental illness it's actually a sign of personal weakness or failure, so it's like, for someone with a mental illness, they might be perceived as, they're just too weak to pull themselves together, or, or they're just lazy, they won't pull themselves out of bed, but they're actually severely depressed, and they can't. Or that it's just people still don't see it as, we call it a mental illness as opposed, as kind of related to, just as you would say, it's a physical illness like a cold.
Yes.
Physical illness, and it is an illness, and it's an illness in the mind and emotions and inability to manage them. So it's I think the understanding that it is an actual illness is not quite the same as the way we would accept a physical illness. And so if it's not seen as a real illness, then people might then have that perception that, well, they'll get over it, with time, they'll kind of get better, just leave them alone, kind of thing.
Of course.
And then as Sunita was saying, I think media does like to sensationalize some of those aspects of mental illnesses. And one thing that's really harmful is when they highlight the dangerousness and unpredictableness, unpredictability of some mental disorder related behaviors. And oftentimes that's, of course, with severe mental illness like psychosis, and of course in some instances with substance use, and when that's associated with other mental disorders as well. And in reality, of course, there are instances where in an episode, someone who is really affected by these disorders can do things that seem unpredictable and cause, be a source of harm to people around them and of course to themselves. But the way it's sensationalized, unfortunately, causes, it fosters fear in people. And then, they just kind of, I'm not sure I want to be associated with these people. I wouldn't want to work with them. I wouldn't want my kids to hang out with their kids. It's that sense of, let's keep that distance. And that really just keeps feeding the stigma and the judgmental attitudes, which is, of course, very unfortunate.
Yes.
And in South Asian diaspora, it's a fear. The family fears that nobody will marry within that family.
Yes.
They are excluded from festivities, excluded from bringing them, calling them, inviting them home, or any celebrations.
Absolutely. Yes. So I was going to ask my next question, but Chris, who also hosts Chai Chat and Community with me once a month, she has a question for you, Marie.
Yes.
It is, I'm just going to show that and I'll read it. And how can we get this dialogue started with our South Asian parents?
Dialogue about mental health?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think starting right at home as parents, I think what's really important is, of course, you would want to become mindful of your own attitudes. So if you realize that in yourself, you have that sense of fear and tendency to judge others, or to put people with mental illness in a negative light in some way or other, that's something that you want to be very mindful of and pick yourself up on that in the first instance, because of course when we are around our kids, they pick things up very quickly and very easily.
Absolutely.
That sense of, if there's that sense of fear or kind of being a bit judgmental about how someone else is behaving, your kids just pick that up, they soak that up, and if that's what they've grown up with, that's how.
Oh, I think Marie is having some tech issues.
Yeah.
Sunita,
so
you
I'll
want to
begin
take
while Marie is coming back. But I think things are changing. Oh, sorry, Marie, you're back. So go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I was just saying, just being very mindful of how we might do some of that negative attitude related behaviors, how we might actually portray that in front of our children, and they will really pick that up and start to perceive the world and perceive people with mental illness in that negative judgmental attitude, with that attitude. And on the opposite, kind of on the other hand, if we once we're mindful of any of these negativities that we might have, to then very consciously and intentionally replace that with a compassionate attitude towards people. So to understand, for example, as I was saying, that mental disorders, they are a real illness, that people are actually unwell. They're not just too weak or too lazy or whatever that negative judgment we might have or perception that we might have towards them. So when they are actually experiencing a mental illness, it's like you're too unwell to get out of bed. If you have a really bad flu, you would be too unwell if you have a really bad case of depression, or you're in an episode of depression, or you have a panic attack, and that's a very real illness that you're struggling with. So to actually view that with compassion as opposed to judgment, that's a really big first step. And so if you see people on the road, and perhaps they might be talking to themselves, or they look really distressed, for whatever reason, to not be too quick to kind of judge, but to actually see if there's something you can do about it. Of course, when within reason, if you're with a young child, of course, you want to make sure that they are safe with you and so on, or with someone else. But to actually demonstrate that compassion and to show your children that these people are real people with real struggles and real difficult challenges that they might need support with. And the last thing they need from us is judgment. So to be able to demonstrate that is probably the most powerful way to begin that with your children. But of course, having conversations at home, when you talk about mental health, there's lots of good things to talk about with mental health, things that you can do to promote your own mental health, to support one another's mental health and well-being, things that are fun, that are enjoyable. And of course, to also make the environment at home and having those conversations where when someone is feeling like they're having a bad day and they're really starting to struggle with something in particular, that the conversation can always be open. There's always an open door to have those conversations, from your children to you, of course, and to respond in a supportive way, as opposed to being so quick to go, stop being so lazy and just get out of bed. If they're actually really having a bad morning, sometimes they just need a hug or maybe a bit more of a, to pull them out of bed, because they just need a bit more of that support. So to be really kind of sensitive to that as well, that in itself creates an environment at home where it's like, actually, it's okay to be struggling. It's okay to talk about it if you're struggling. And at the same time, you're also there to boost one another's good mental health. So kind of both the good and the bad, both are welcome and accepted at home.
Thank you. Sunita, you want to say something?
Yeah. Adding to what Marie said, there's a lot of means I'm speaking from the South Asian diaspora, kind of how you can start dialogue with family members. One is, as Marie said, being a role model, and when a child is crying or somebody's fearing, not judge them. And then we are seeing that a lot of good things are happening that from Indian diaspora or South Asian diaspora. Like there is a gentleman named Jagesh Panchal. He started a Shakti Mental Health. And
I know Jagesh.
Testimonies, they are coming forward, sharing their struggles, and they are also mentioning openly. And there is another one, Bottled Up. Sunny Bahuguna and Mayank Sohani, they do the podcast related to these things and tell, so families can listen to these podcasts and these, go to the website and go through the stories and, testimonials of people, what their struggles are. And not means I spoke that, media plays a negative role, but at the same time, there are movies and documentaries which explain about the mental health. Like, for example, Beautiful Mind, the English movie, and recently the K-drama Attorney Woo. And and there are Indian movies like the Death in Ganj. It's a serious movie, but it talks about the challenges mental health people feel. And a Marathi movie, Devrai. It's about how the schizophrenia develops in a person and how his sister and family support them. So there's a lot of good things happening, which I think families can do a role model by sitting with the family members and discussing openly and talking, how to handle when they see these documentaries or movies, how it was handled, how it was not handled. They can have that kind of dialogue without any, putting somebody down.
Yeah. We have two more questions. I will get to both of you. Chris and Shreyoshi is watching from India, so we have international audience. I think, Marie, you answered this question, but I'll ask again. Simple things to improve our mental health.
Yeah, totally. So I think we're all, we're all social beings. So one really important thing is to have supportive and positive social connections around us.
Absolutely.
Of course, the obvious one is within your family, but to have close friends, that you can trust and who trust you, of course, as well, and be open and honest with. And then, communities and cultural networks that you belong to, that you feel a sense of belonging within. Those are all really important social networks for you to maintain connections with. And, it's both anecdotally as well as research supported, plays such a huge role in maintaining our mental health and also supporting us when we are starting to struggle with our mental health. The other really important one that's kind of a day-to-day thing is our lifestyle habits, and really kind of basic things like having balanced regular meals, having daily physical activities, and preferably some outdoors whenever possible. In Melbourne, the weather is really unpredictable, but having some of that natural light is important. Having good quality and good amount of sleep for your stage of development. That's kind of like a bit of a no-brainer, but actually we'll be shocked at the statistics about how many people in a population do not get the right amount of sleep for their age and stage of life. And of course, we talked a bit about substance use as well. We know that oftentimes is substance misuse often happens in the context of poor mental health, and likewise is both a kind of a chicken and egg. Misusing substances also increases our risk of poorer mental health, and when we have poor mental health, we are also at higher risk of becoming more dependent on or relying on substance use to kind of help us cope. So being mindful about how we are using substances, if we are using them, is also another thing that you can do to support your own mental health.
Thank you. I have questions coming in.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yes,
I'll add to what Mani has
No.
said. It is very important. Like what I feel is that, one of the things which I feel that more importantly, having a balance of between spiritual and scientific way of leading a life. For example.
Thank you. I didn't want to say that. Thank you.
So with a free will, praying, going to temple, churches, mosque, gurudwara, it is important. It is good for it's helpful for mental health. Whereas doing these things with a fear, something bad is going to happen, is not good for mental health.
Yes.
And also like astrology, vastu, and numerology, they creating fear.
Tarot cards is a new thing. Tarot cards. I speak tarot cards now. Read tarot,
Yeah, and one more thing is that we live in South Asian families are very collectivistic, so you have to kind of maybe learn to say no, because we want to take care of our families back home. We want to meet their expectations, but at the same time one has to see your own capabilities and decide how much you can do for them or how much you can.
Yes.
So because it puts a lot of stress and it impacts mental health.
Absolutely. So Marie, there's a question for you here. I'll show it on the screen.
Yes.
Intergenerational trauma. Yes.
So of course, it's whether it's intergenerational trauma or any other form of trauma, by definition, trauma impacts mental health. So it's for anyone who has experienced trauma, if it's intergenerational trauma or any other form of interpersonal trauma or non-interpersonal trauma, it's really important to look after yourself, to find support around you. And there are resources, professional supports available, and to seek that support, to be able to find people around you who are aware and supportive of what you are going through, to be able to talk about it when you are feeling able to, rather than because you're feeling forced to, and to actually be able to access the professional supports. There are professional treatments that are available to help people overcome the impacts of trauma on their mental health, whether that's post-traumatic stress disorder as a specific disorder or other forms of mental disorders that also happen in the context of a traumatic experience. So it's definitely, if you are aware of people who have experienced any form of trauma and have not and are not coping because of the impact of that on their mental health, to really encourage them to seek professional help, because we know that seeking help earlier can increase the chances of better recovery.
Thank you. Sunita, you want to say something?
No, I think Marie is expert on this area.
Okay. Okay, so here's a question from India.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, it's really challenging. When the people around you are not understanding that, as I was saying earlier, that the mental health challenges you're experiencing, they are real. They're not just in your head. They're not a reflection that you're weak. And you know, it is an illness as much as, like I said, you know, a cold, the flu, COVID-19. You know, they are real illnesses. Or, you know, although some people dispute that. You know, so it's that if you're able to find professional resources or access to professional supports in India where you are, who actually do understand, I would really, of course, strongly encourage you to do that. Of course, it's to be able to change stigma in a community, you know, could take a generation, and of course, a lot of
including family, isn't it? This is family saying it's all in your head.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, so if it's within your own family, of course, you know, these are the people that you would have liked, you know, to be the most supportive, because they
Absolutely.
are, you know, the people closest to you. So it would hurt even more when it's coming from them, if they are not understanding or supportive. So I mean, I'm assuming, of course, that you have tried to explain to them. Perhaps if they are open to it, you know, you could refer them to professional resources that explain, you know, or help them to better understand, you know, the kind of mental health challenges you're experiencing, and to be able to relate to that, so that they would be able to recognize that what you're describing is not just in your head, but, you know, there are literally millions of people around the world who experience these mental health challenges, and that there are things that can be done to help you overcome what you're experiencing. So I'm really hopeful that you'll be able to access that kind of support very soon.
Sorry, Marie, there is another question for you.
Of course. Yeah. So some of the common signs, and of course, you know, depression is experienced slightly differently for different people, but some of the common signs of depression are when you have significant changes with your sleep. So either you can't fall asleep, or you fall asleep and you wake up multiple times, and if you wake up too early, you can't go back to sleep. So disruptions to sleep, changes to appetite. You know, you might feel like you need to eat a lot more, or you feel like you can't eat at all, you know, because you just don't have an appetite. But the most important signs are, you know, the change in your mood, you know, so where you feel really low, unmotivated, and just really sad. In everything is just, it's like a filter, you know, around to your whole world. It's like putting on sunglasses in a room that has, you know, barely any natural light, and you're still putting on sunglasses. Everything just looks grayer and darker, that to you than to anyone else. So that sense of low mood actually continuing beyond, you know, just a couple of days because you're going through a difficult situation at home or at work, but actually lasting a few weeks. A sense of hopelessness is also possible. Reduced energy, reduced motivation, not having feeling any purpose in life, you know. So a combination of some of these different signs can happen for different people with depression, and at times as well, when people feel really, really low, they also have thoughts of taking their own life. And so, you know, in those instances, of course, it becomes more of a crisis than just depression. And it's really important that you seek help and find someone supportive around you to help you through those really dark moments. So if you're questioning whether you might be having depression, then perhaps you are struggling with something that you are finding difficult to manage. So do reach out to someone you trust, or try to access some professional help if available at all, to help you through that, because people do manage to ride through depression, and there is hope for recovery from that really dark time if that's what you're experiencing.
Thank you. I'm going to show a comment. So Joshi has reached out. Yep, that's good. Chris, I'm going to come to your questions in a minute. I just want to ask both Marie and Sunita questions. So, we can explain mental health issues to a grown-up, mostly we can. However, there are two sets of people we cannot do it. One is parents. Many of us have parents who live overseas, to explain that to them, or even, first generation migrants like us, having to explain to our parents who are with us in Australia. How do you explain to them? How do you explain, and more importantly, how do you explain mental health issues to a child, say a 4-year-old? Because we're talking about, 1 in 7 children and adolescents between 4 and 17 have mental health issues. So how would you explain to a parent and to a child? I mean, obviously there are different conversations, but we'll take parents first, because like Sunita said, many of us have responsibilities.
Yes.
And there is so much expectations if you're a first generation migrant from parents back home that, you will do this, you will do that. And it's also a question of pride for them, that their child has gone overseas and made a life. And if you tell them that you have, you have mental health issues, then it is something that is so difficult. And most times, and I know now that there are many young people, especially international students who come, they pay a lot of money to come and study here. They're going through mental health issues, but they do not know how to tell their parents. So one is that, and then we'll do the child part.
Yeah, it is a really tough one, and I appreciate that. It's the dynamics are really different as you were describing there, Celia. So, what I would consider, of course, this might or might not work depending on the situation, is to find analogies to what they can understand. So if there's some cultural metaphors or some cultural understandings that you can draw upon and use that as an analogy, like the example that I was using multiple times earlier about there's a physical illness like a cold, there's a mental illness like depression, so both are real illnesses, and in fact there's a lot of evidence that mental illnesses do get reflected in the brain, in your physiological neurochemicals in your brain, and what's going on in your body, your physical body. So they're all closely interrelated. So it's not a lie, to say that, it's there is an illness that you're going through. So that would be my suggestion. And that is also the suggestion that I would make when speaking to children, so even a 4-year-old kid is probably, would have experienced a cold or, fever at some time, or maybe seen a sibling or an adult in the family experiencing a physical illness. So to be able to draw that connection for them, because they can, for children, of course, is because they need to have something really concrete, that they can actually visibly, link it to. So having really concrete metaphors like that, or analogies that you can link, mental illness to, is a really important first step to helping them to understand that it's a real thing. And of course, the symptoms might look a little bit different at times, but it's a real thing, just as a cold is a real thing, for example,
or a fever. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Sunita, you want to put a cultural lens to it?
Yeah, so I think, with parents, we recently went through a big difficult time, COVID, right? So how did they feel at that time? The elders, I think talking to
Being
them, that
locked up,
how, yeah, being locked up, how you felt. So this is something the person who is suffering from anxiety or depression also feels in that state, what you felt. I think maybe, and with children, I think, as Marie was saying, explaining to them, but at the same time, I think parents have to understand themselves, what child is going through, and, having a patience to listen to them, let them, if they are showing throwing tantrum, allowing them to throw that instead of jumping and shouting them at them, shut up, and, I will put you in a room or anything. So giving them that time space and then talking to them about the situation will be helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. Sunita, there is a question for you. Sorry, not from you, for you.
Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge I think the migrant woman faces, one is that language, the accent, because the English language here is little different than back in the South Asian diaspora. And if they are coming as marriage migrants, like if they are coming because they were
As
married to a
partners,
person
yes, yeah.
as partners, they go through a lot of challenges, because I think they have been married saying that it is your responsibility. As a wife, you are supposed to take care of your husband, you are supposed to have your children, and back home, if the extended family like in-laws, either they are living here or back home, so the person has a lot of responsibilities. So that stress adds to them, and the concept of me time is not there. So so bringing that, I think that awareness, creating that, having me time is important, and the spouses helping them when they come here is important. Yeah.
Also, we don't have words for depression, for mental health in our languages. In the
That's right.
various languages that we speak across South Asia, there is not one single word that kind of describes mental health. So I
And
think that is a big problem for us because we don't have a descriptor.
we also don't have descriptor for emotions, like angry, we
Yep,
have only one word, angry, whereas in
yep.
English we have grumpy, sulky, different ways to express different emotions. In our languages we don't have those. It's either you are happy or you are mad, you know
Yep, that's right.
Mm.
Um, this is another question. I'll let Marie take it first.
Yeah. Well, and of course I'm going to have to read into this. So when you say disruptive, the way I'm interpreting it is that they are not really listening when you're trying to explain to them, or they might kind of argue back, or they're not accepting of what you're offering in some way or other. So I suppose it really depends on the nature of the relationship, and and any power difference there might be in that relationship, how you can navigate that. But generally, with people who are, they are a family member, so you kind of, you're stuck with them, to some extent, and of course the relationship is important, that you are able to get along in some way. So I think in the first instance, of course, I would encourage you to try to have that open conversation with them about the way they're coming across to you, so the impact that they are having on you. If they're genuine family member who, at the end of the day still cares about the family, hopefully you can use that as the foundation to go, there's something going on that's making it really hard for us to communicate with each other and kind of get along. Can we talk about that, and can we find a solution to overcome this challenge that's coming across? So if that conversation is possible, then of course I would encourage that in the first instance. If for whatever reason it is proving to be challenging, even despite the attempt you make, if there are other family members you trust and respect, and that the other person trusts and respects, that you could also bring into the conversation to help mediate perhaps that conversation, hopefully that would also help as well, because sometimes, of course, if the two people in the conversation are quite heated and, of course, taking everything personally, to have an hopefully more objective third party step in who is respected by both parties, could also help to kind of de-escalate and put things, in a different perspective, and keep that more respectful and objective in the resolution. So those just kind of based on that question, hopefully that's helpful.
Sunita, you want to say something?
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
It's a very difficult one, especially with family. How do you draw the line?
Right,
Drawing the
yeah.
line is a problem.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it is challenging, but as Marie said, taking having an open conversation, finding a day or time which, when you see their mood is better, maybe that's the time, maybe sitting down with them and saying, this is the difference. Yeah.
Timing is
De-escalate.
important.
Yeah, timing is important.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Chris has her last question, and then I will ask a quick question. Thank you, Chris, for all your questions. I'm
Sorry,
guessing she's talking about women who have moved to Australia, because we wouldn't know what happens in South Asia. I mean, where to get help.
I found this on the web.
Sorry, that was
So-
my iPhone speaking, responding to you.
Siri wants to answer.
I know.
Siri wants to answer.
Yes. Yeah. So if the experiences are still impacting on these women,
So this is the intergenerational trauma also that we keep hearing about,
Yeah, absolutely. So in Australia, there are a whole range of different resources that Beyond Blue offers. So that's kind of just general mental health counseling, and could be just a once-off. If you just want to speak to someone about how you are feeling in the moment, or if you wanted to reflect on how your past experiences you think they might be affecting how you're feeling at the moment. Those helplines are great for that, and you can do it via web chat or phone call. For young people, there are also resources, say such as from Headspace, as well as from Reach Out, for example, that are youth specific. If at any point in time you feel like sorry, I'm saying you, but the young
we understand.
women
Yep.
referring to feel like they're struggling and they're having thoughts of harming themselves. There's of course Lifeline that is available to all adults across Australia. For children who are struggling at any point in time with their mental health, there's Kids Helpline as well, and they reach out to. They're open as a free service for children as young as 5 all the way through to mid-20s. So there are a lot of these resources that are freely available to anyone. They don't have wait lists generally. There might be a bit of a wait time, but they are generally kind of helplines that anybody can access for that occasional chat. If there's any of that abuse that's still going on, of course, in a current relationship, there are resources that are available as well. Or if there are concerns about the relationship itself, there are resources such as Relationships Australia that you can get resources on. If there are children involved, there's the Orange Door that you could seek out as well. But if you go to Beyond Blue, for example, they have a lot of these different links that you can look up, and that could refer you to other resources available in Australia. And if you're looking for specific mental health services, the government Head to Health website is also a good one where you can find a lot of these different links to different sources of support.
Thank you. Sunita, do you want to say, let's talk about women who do not understand English? Would these organizations like Beyond Blue have translation services?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
One of the things that we keep, you and I are part of a group where most of the women, for them, English is a second language, and a lot of them don't speak it fluently. Chris is also part of that group, so obviously we know what is happening to women and how they talk about it, whether it's family abuse, whether it's depression. It all culminates in this big mental health illness. Is there? Do you know? I know. I'm sure Shakti will have some kind of translation services.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will
they
help.
have
But
in Shakti Mental Health, they have resources for counselors and psychology, list of resources, people whom they can approach.
Yep.
And I think Anushka Pal, I think she.
Oh, I know Anushka. Yep.
She
Umid
has
psychology.
Yep. She. I think I'm forgetting the name of her.
Umid psychology.
Umid psychology. So that the South Asian name, I think it helps approach people. So those kind of I think some of the psychology and psychiatry websites, they have that, we speak multiple different languages. So I think those kind of things are there. Definitely, I will say that I'm seeing a lot of translated material in different areas, like the council where I live, but I don't see South Asian languages in that. So, like
So it, yep,
it's taking
yep.
India, right? Like we have high number of population of Punjabi and Hindi, but I did not see that particular language in there. No. So, yeah.
I'll
Yes.
do some research before putting it up on YouTube. Last question. I had thought this would be 30 minutes. It's now 45. So thank you for your patience. We keep hearing about are you okay? Asking your friend, your neighbor, your child, your family member. How do we support friends and families who are going through mental health issues?
So I would recommend anyone who's interested to find out more to look up mental health first aid, which is, of course, a very well-established program internationally to help people to better understand mental health and, more importantly, to support those around them who are experiencing mental health challenges or might be experiencing a crisis. So the Mental Health First Aid Action Plan, as is very widely known, has 5 key steps, and these can be used with anyone you know, not necessarily in this order. But one of the key things to do, as I was just alluding to, is to find out if the person is actually at risk of suicide or harm to others to any extent. So, like I said, for someone who's feeling really down and hopeless, whether that's depression or some other mental illnesses, they are at, that there is a risk that they might actually harm themselves and take their own lives. And so it's really important, as you were alluding to with Are You Okay Day, it's all about opening up that conversation and finding out, I can see that you're really struggling. Some people, when they feel that way, actually want to just end their lives. Is that how you think? And to be able to just have that open conversation in a really compassionate and supportive way. Of course, maintaining confidentiality wherever possible, but taking steps as necessary to keep the person safe is the top priority if they are actually at risk. Another part of the action plan is about listening non-judgmentally. So as I already mentioned a few times, that sense of compassion, that sense of acceptance, regardless of what they are saying, that they are experiencing, to accept that this is what they are feeling. You might not understand it, you might not agree with their perception or their interpretation, but this is what they are experiencing, and it's as real for them as your hands, your hair, your face is as real to you. So to be able to listen that way. Being reassuring, giving them information that they might need, helping them to find information, because sometimes, of course, if you're really struggling and feeling really distressed, you're not in any state to even ask Siri to give you some information, and someone there to help you find Lifeline's number, to make that phone call can be such a critical little step of support to be with someone who's struggling. To encourage appropriate professional support, so as we were talking about, there are professional resources out there, and sometimes just that first step can make a huge difference. So to really encourage them that there's no shame in getting help, when you need it. And help can be beneficial when you find it from the right sources, so it's really important to encourage them to find the professional help that they actually need, if that's the case. And of course, not everyone at all times will be needing professional help. There are also a lot of things that we can do within ourselves, within our own support networks and our family and friends and community, that we can do to help ourselves get through challenging times. So to actually find out, what some of those activities are, some of those daily lifestyle habits that I mentioned, that you could actually start picking up, finding people around you, whom you could round up and actually lean on when you need it. So having that support network, engaging in activities and programs that you enjoy and can support you to help you build those connections, all of those things that you can actually do, and not just boost your mental health when things are going okay, but also support you when you need help to get out of a more challenging time as well. So those are the the 5 steps of the action plan for the mental health first aid. So if you're really interested to find out more, just jump online and Google mental health first aid for those of you who are interested.
I'm going to write that, mental health first aid. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before I go, Sunita, did you want to say something?
Adding to what Marie said, I would like to reiterate, right, being empathetic and non-judgmental, and Are You Okay Day is not one day, it's every day. And especially, if you are seeing somebody is having challenges, not, instead of breaking ties with them, make efforts to reach out to them and offer, to spend time with them, invite them to celebration festivities, and also in Indian or South Asian diaspora, there is a way of communicating is very intrusive. So not be very intrusive to find out more details, but be gentle and broach the topic with very sensitively and allow them to open up if the person is having a challenge. Not that, oh, you don't have any problem, like this is not a big deal. If they just start telling you, don't try to shut them. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been awesome. Good night,
you.
everyone. And thank you for watching. Okay, bye.
Bye.